In a quiet, tucked-away corner of a suburban neighborhood stood an unassuming two-story house. To any passerby, it seemed ordinary: a white picket fence enclosing a neat yard, the delicate scent of roses in bloom, and a soft yellow porch light that glowed warmly at dusk. But behind that charming facade, a story was unfolding, one that would touch the deepest corners of the human heart and forever change the lives of those within. Anna Williams had always been a picture of grace and resilience. A schoolteacher with kind eyes and a voice that could soothe the most restless child, she carried a secret weight, invisible to her colleagues and neighbors. That weight was her husband, Marcus. Once a charismatic and ambitious man, Marcus had gradually become someone Anna scarcely recognized. Volatile, unpredictable, with a temper that flared like a dry field catching fire. Among their home's inhabitants, one soul had seen it all: Ash, the orange tabby cat with eyes as sharp and knowing as polished amber. Adopted by Anna as a stray kitten years before, Ash had always been more than just a pet. He was her silent confidant, a witness to whispered sorrows in the dead of night, and a constant, reassuring presence curled at the foot of her bed when loneliness threatened to engulf her. The evening the storm broke, there was an uneasy stillness in the house. Anna moved quietly from room to room, tidying the living room, fluffing cushions with hands that trembled. Marcus was late, and though she willed herself to stay calm, a familiar dread coiled in her chest. Ash padded across the room, his keen senses alert. He nuzzled against her leg, purring deeply as if to say, "I'm here. I'll stay." Anna glanced at the clock, the minute hand stretching into the silence like a blade. She wiped her palms on her apron and picked up the remote, trying to distract herself with a cooking show, the cheerful chatter of the hosts grating against the tension that throbbed in her veins. But then came the sound she dreaded, the thud of boots against the porch steps, heavy and fast, followed by the jingle of keys. The door swung open with a force that rattled the picture frames on the wall. Marcus stood in the entryway, eyes red-rimmed, the stale stench of alcohol clinging to him like a shadow. He was a large man, his broad frame filling the space with an imposing presence that left no room for anything else. His gaze swept the room and settled on Anna, narrowing. "You're just sitting there," he spat, his voice low and dangerous. Anna's fingers tightened around the remote as if it were a lifeline. She stood slowly, heart hammering in her chest. "I was waiting for you," she said, the effort to keep her voice steady making it sound almost robotic. Marcus's eyes darkened. The silence that followed was suffocating, charged with unspoken threats. And then, with a sudden, terrifying motion, he swept a vase from the side table, sending it crashing to the floor. The shards sparkled under the lamplight like malicious stars. Ash hissed, his fur bristling as he darted to a safer distance. But his eyes never left Marcus, unblinking and alert. The room seemed to freeze in that moment, an invisible line drawn between predator and protector. "Why do you make me do this?" Marcus bellowed, stepping closer, fists clenched. Anna backed away instinctively, bumping into the coffee table and nearly losing her balance. Her vision blurred with the sting of unshed tears. She knew the cycle too well, the rage, the apologies, the hollow promises. But this time felt different. There was an air of finality, a chilling certainty that this night would not end like the others. Suddenly, Marcus lunged forward, his hand reaching out like a viper striking its prey. But just as his fingers grazed her arm, a flash of orange leaped into the fray. Ash, small and lithe, had launched himself from the windowsill with an unearthly yowl, claws extended and teeth bared. He collided with Marcus's forearm, digging in with every ounce of his feline might. Marcus howled, eyes wide with shock and pain as Ash clung on, his fierce amber eyes boring into Marcus's like a judgment passed. In that instant, the room was no longer just a stage for fear. It became a battleground, a place where courage, however unlikely, found a voice in the form of a cat who refused to back down. Anna's gasp turned into a cry as she watched, unable to move, heart thundering in a mixture of fear and awe. Ash's fierce protection was a sight she had never imagined. Marcus's eyes, wide with both fury and disbelief, met the unwavering gaze of Ash, who, despite his small size, was locked in combat as if he were a lion defending its pride. The sharp sting of claws pierced Marcus's skin, and for a fleeting second, the house, which had so often been drowned in shouts and echoes of tension, was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the ragged sound of his breath. The pain snapped Marcus out of his shock. He flailed his arm, trying to dislodge the determined tabby, but Ash clung with relentless ferocity. Each movement was met with a new swipe of claws and a guttural hiss that seemed to resonate with something primal. It was as though every moment of quiet companionship Ash had shared with Anna had been a prelude to this single, defiant act. Anna watched, frozen between terror and disbelief, as Marcus staggered backward, eyes blazing. "Get off me, you stupid cat!" he roared, his voice cracking under the strain of panic and pain. He swung his arm wildly, and with one final shake, Ash was dislodged, sent skidding across the floor. The impact was harsh, a small thud that echoed in Anna's chest like a second heartbeat. The cat lay still for a moment that felt like an eternity, his amber eyes closing briefly. "No!" The word ripped from Anna's throat as she dropped to her knees beside Ash, her trembling hands reaching for his tiny frame. She cradled him, feeling the rapid rise and fall of his chest and the warmth of life still pulsing through him. Relief flooded her, mingling with fear as she looked up to see Marcus advancing, his face twisted in rage, a trickle of blood staining the sleeve of his shirt. "You think this is over?" His voice was low, dangerous, each word laced with a promise of retribution. But something changed in Anna at that moment. The sight of Ash, brave and battered, fighting for her in a way she had never been able to fight for herself, ignited a spark deep within her. The terror that had kept her silent for so long began to melt under the warmth of that spark, replaced by a simmering resolve. "No, Marcus," she said, her voice steady despite the quiver in her limbs. "It's over." His step faltered, as if struck by the unexpected defiance in her tone. But the hesitation was brief, and his fists clenched again as he moved forward. Before he could close the distance, however, Ash stirred. The little cat, battered but undeterred, pushed himself up on shaky legs and placed himself between Marcus and Anna once more, his tail lashing, eyes fierce despite the pain etched in his expression. The room crackled with an unspoken tension, an invisible battle of wills. For the first time, Marcus hesitated, his gaze shifting between Anna's unwavering eyes and the cat that stood guard, wounded but undefeated. The bravado that had fueled his anger seemed to falter under the weight of their silent defiance. "Leave, Marcus," Anna whispered, the strength in her voice surprising even her. "Leave before this goes any further." The man who had once towered over her with such menace now seemed diminished, his figure hunched and defeated. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the mantel, marking the slow return of peace to the room. With a muttered curse and one last glare, Marcus turned on his heel and stormed out, the door slamming behind him like the final note of a dissonant symphony. Anna's knees gave way as the adrenaline drained from her, and she sank to the floor, pulling Ash into her lap. The cat's purr, a gentle rumble that resonated with the echo of 1,000 shared moments, filled the quiet. Tears streamed down her face, a release of relief, gratitude, and a bittersweet recognition of the courage she had found, not only in herself but in the loyal heart of the unlikely hero she cradled. Outside, the night air was cool, carrying with it the distant hum of life beyond their walls. Inside, the room felt different. It was the same space, but the shadows seemed softer now, no longer tinged with the suffocating weight of fear. Instead, they whispered of change, of a future yet unwritten but forged in courage and love. Ash shifted in her arms, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet understanding. He blinked slowly, a feline gesture that spoke volumes. It was as if he was saying, "We did it. We're safe now." The realization settled over Anna like a blanket of stars, fragile but infinite. For the first time in years, she felt the stirrings of hope, a fragile bloom unfurling in the darkest of places. She pressed a kiss to Ash's head, the warmth of his fur grounding her as the first rays of dawn crept into the room, painting the walls with a promise of new beginnings. The house settled into a quiet that Anna had almost forgotten existed. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the living room floor, now littered with the remnants of last night's chaos, the shattered vase, the overturned chair. But amidst the disarray, there was peace, fragile and new. Ash, bandaged with gentle care and nestled in a patch of sunlight, kept a watchful eye on Anna. Though his small frame bore signs of the night's struggle, his spirit remained unyielded. Anna sat beside him, her fingers brushing through his fur as if to reassure herself that he was real, that they were both still here. The hours ticked by, and with them, the weight of decisions yet to be made pressed upon Anna. The truth she'd long avoided was laid bare in the light of day. Staying was no longer an option. But leaving meant facing fears that had grown roots deep within her, the uncertainty of where to go, how to start anew. She had always thought herself incapable of such a bold step. Yet as she looked at Ash, the cat who had faced down an angry giant for her, something shifted inside her, a voice echoing with newfound conviction. "You can do this. We can do this." The sound of a car engine cut through the morning quiet, and Anna's heart leaped into her throat. She peeked through the window, her breath catching as Marcus's car pulled into the driveway. He sat motionless behind the wheel, staring at the house with an intensity that made the minutes stretch unbearably. The familiar dread threatened to creep back, coiling in her gut, but Anna closed her eyes, drawing strength from the steady rhythm of Ash's purring at her side. When Marcus finally emerged, his movements were slow, deliberate. He looked different, less a monster, more a man weighed down by the consequences of his actions. He approached the door and hesitated, his hand hovering over the knob. The silence between them was palpable, a gulf filled with unspoken apologies and years of unresolved pain. Anna stood, planting herself between the door and Ash, her fingers trembling but determined. When Marcus opened the door, his eyes met hers, searching for something, perhaps forgiveness, perhaps understanding. But Anna's expression was resolute, her voice even as she spoke. "You need to leave, Marcus," she said, each word steady as a stone. "I'm done living in fear." The shock that flashed across his face was fleeting, replaced by a hollow acceptance. He nodded, a stiff movement that spoke of defeat and shame. He glanced down at Ash, who sat upright, tail curled around his paws, unwavering in his silent vigilance. Marcus swallowed hard, a muscle in his jaw working as he struggled for words that never came. Without a sound, he turned and walked back to his car, the slam of the door echoing through the stillness as he drove away. The silence that followed was deep, a chasm where fear once thrived now filled with the tentative tendrils of relief. Anna dropped to the floor, pressing her palms to her face as a sob racked her body, not one of sorrow, but of release, of liberation long overdue. Ash moved closer, his head nudging her hand, his purr a lifeline that anchored her to the present. Time seemed to blur as the hours passed. Anna called a friend she hadn't spoken to in years, a voice that responded with warmth and concern, offering a place to stay, help to rebuild. The weight she'd carried for so long began to lift, piece by piece, as she spoke aloud the truths she'd kept buried. When the doorbell rang later that afternoon, it startled her. She opened it to find Mr. Jefferson, the elderly neighbor who lived 2 doors down, holding a small bundle of herbs and a pot of homemade chicken soup. "I heard a commotion last night, dear," he said, eyes kind but worried. "Thought you might need a little something today." Tears welled up again, but this time they were born of gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. I'm all right now," she said, her voice breaking slightly as she glanced at Ash, who watched from the hallway, tail flicking softly as if in approval. The old man's eyes followed hers, and he chuckled, the sound lightening the room. "That cat of yours is something special, isn't he?" Anna nodded, a smile spreading across her face for the first time in what felt like forever. "He's a hero," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. And he was. In the space of a heartbeat, he had changed everything, shifting the balance from fear to hope, from helplessness to strength. As night fell once more, the house was bathed in the soft glow of lamps, the shadows gentle and undemanding. Ash curled up at the foot of the bed, eyes half closed, but still alert as ever. Anna lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, feeling the echoes of the day reverberate through her. Fear, courage, freedom. "You saved me, you know," she murmured, reaching out to stroke his fur. He blinked slowly, a gesture of trust and love that spoke volumes without words. And as sleep finally claimed her, Anna knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be moments of doubt, of fear, and of struggle. But she also knew that she would face them with a heart made braver by an unlikely guardian who had leapt into action when she needed it most. The days following Marcus's departure felt like walking on the edge of an unknown path, frightening but exhilarating. Anna, with Ash never far from her side, began to reclaim her life one step at a time. The house, which once felt like a prison, gradually transformed into a sanctuary. The oppressive silence of fear was replaced with soft music playing from the radio, the hum of phone conversations with friends, and the quiet laughter that came when memories surfaced of brighter days. The first morning that Anna awoke without the ache of dread in her chest was a revelation. Sunlight poured through her bedroom window, and Ash, as if sensing the change, leaped onto her bed and settled beside her, his eyes half closed in contentment. She traced the patch of white fur on his chest, a spot that had always reminded her of a tiny star. It felt fitting now. He was her star, guiding her out of the dark. Anna's plan to leave the house for a while and stay with her friend Clara was met with mixed emotions. There was the relief of stepping away from the place that had seen too much pain, but also the bittersweet realization that it had once been her dream home. Packing was slow, each item tucked into boxes bringing a flood of memories, some warm, others suffocating. But through it all, Ash remained a steadfast companion, weaving between her feet, offering nudges of encouragement when her resolve wavered. One evening, as she boxed up the last of her books, there was a knock at the door. Expecting Clara, who had promised to help with the final preparations, Anna opened it to find a young man standing there, holding a toolbox and wearing a cap embroidered with City Shelter Services. "Hi, Miss Williams. My name's Eric. I'm here to fix the lock on your back door. You put in a request," he said, looking up with eyes that seemed to carry both youth and a quiet wisdom. Anna blinked, a rush of realization hitting her. Clara must have made the request after hearing about Marcus's volatile return a few days prior. She swallowed the lump in her throat and stepped aside. "Yes, thank you for coming," she said, offering a tight smile. As Eric worked, Anna watched the rhythm of his hands, steady and sure, the sound of tools tapping against metal punctuating the quiet. Ash sat nearby, observing with curiosity. When Eric glanced up and saw the cat watching him intently, a smile spread across his face. "Is he always this serious?" Eric asked, chuckling as Ash's tail flicked, unimpressed by the stranger's interruption. Anna laughed, a sound that felt strange and wonderful in her own ears. "Only when there's important work being done," she said, a fondness in her tone that made Eric's smile widen. The new lock clicked into place, sturdy and secure. "There," Eric said, wiping his hands on a cloth. "This should keep you safe." Safe. The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Anna nodded, her gratitude deeper than words could express. "Thank you, Eric. Really." He nodded, packing up his tools. Before he left, he paused at the doorway. "My mom had a cat like him once," he said, gesturing to Ash. "Fierce little guardian, just like your guy here. They know more than we give them credit for." As the door closed behind him, Anna sat on the floor, Ash climbing into her lap. The house was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, one that felt peaceful, expectant, as if waiting for the next chapter to unfold. The weeks turned into months, and each day brought new victories, some small, others monumental. Anna took long walks in the park, the breeze carrying the scent of lilacs, a reminder that life moved forward, and so could she. Ash, who once prowled the windowsill watching the world go by, now explored the backyard, paws cautiously stepping into freedom he'd never known. They were both learning what it meant to live without fear, to embrace moments of joy without looking over their shoulders. One afternoon, Clara visited with a surprise: 2 tickets to a local storytelling event at the community center. "It'll be good for you, Anna," she said, her eyes full of encouragement. "Come meet new people, share your story." Anna hesitated, glancing at Ash, who had taken to curling up in a patch of sun by the door, always aware, always listening. The idea of sharing her story felt daunting, exposing the rawness of what she'd endured. But Ash's presence, his unwavering support through each sleepless night and quiet victory, gave her courage. The evening of the event, Anna stood on the small stage, the room buzzing with the warmth of shared stories and laughter. She told her tale, her voice quivering at first but gaining strength as she spoke of courage found in the unlikeliest places, of a guardian with 4 paws and an indomitable spirit. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, but it was the tearful smile of an older woman in the front row that anchored her heart, a silent understanding shared between those who knew what it meant to fight their way back to life. That night, as Anna sat on her porch, Ash beside her, she felt the first stars of the evening blink into view. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of jasmine. She stroked Ash's fur, the two of them framed by a silence that spoke not of what had been lost, but of what had been found. "Thank you," she whispered to him, her voice breaking with emotion. And in the stillness, Ash blinked slowly, his amber eyes reflecting the glow of the porch light, as if to say, "Always." The house now stood as a testament to resilience, each corner bathed in a newfound sense of peace. What had once been a place marked by fear had transformed into a sanctuary, a space where laughter and lightness could thrive. And at the heart of it all was Ash, ever watchful, ever present, a reminder that heroes come in all forms, some with 4 legs and eyes that see into the soul. As the months passed, Anna found herself embracing life with a courage she hadn't known she possessed. She began volunteering at the community center, sharing her story with others who struggled in the shadows of their own fears. It wasn't just about recounting the pain, it was about speaking to the strength that comes from love and loyalty, even from the most unlikely of protectors. Ash, now a familiar presence at the center, brought comfort to everyone he met, his gentle purrs and knowing eyes a balm to weary hearts. People would often remark on his bravery, how a small cat could become the defender of a life, a beacon of hope in the darkest of nights. To Anna, he was more than a pet. He was the embodiment of the resilience that had carried her through. One evening, as they sat on the porch under the velvet canopy of the sky, Anna reflected on the journey that had brought them there. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the scent of spring and renewal. She reached for Ash, who curled beside her, his warmth anchoring her in the present. "You showed me what it means to be brave," she whispered, her voice soft with gratitude. He responded with a slow blink, a gesture of trust that spoke louder than words. In that quiet moment, with the stars above and the promise of new beginnings stretching out before them, Anna realized that they were not just survivors. They were adventurers on the path of a life reborn, carrying the scars of the past but moving forward, side by side.